All right, so page 7, number 2. Data from medical study contain values. I'm not going to read through the whole thing because y'all just read through it. I want it as a list, just like we did this one. So in our categorical list, how many of the variables are categorical? 3. What are they? Gender, race, and smoker. This one doesn't say, it just says smoker, yes, no, right? They called it smoker status. It doesn't give you a label there, or does it give you? Yeah. So some of you might have just put smoker. Smoker status makes more sense, but you would have to kind of come up with that one on your own, which I would go either way with that. How many quantitative variables are there? What's one of them? Age. Next one, systolic blood pressure and level of calcium. So that was super easy going through number 2. Number 4, this is the one about roller coasters. We just talked about this outside of the video. The individuals, I said very vaguely what they are, but I want you to be specific to the problem. So what is a good answer for your individuals for number 4?
Roller coasters opened in 2009.
Roller coasters that were opened in 2009. And I said it vaguely before, just making sure you understood. But remember what I said about be as specific as the problem, but don't kind of make up anything. So it literally said roller coasters that were opened in 2009. So that should be your answer as your individuals. Our different variables, so our categorical variables were what? Roller coaster name, type, which is fine, and then design. And then how many quantitative? 3, which were height, speed, and duration. Now with those, I would want to see probably height, parentheses, in feet, speed, parentheses, in miles per hour, and duration, parentheses, in seconds. Because that makes sense, or at least the way it did it, labeled there with the parentheses, S, parentheses, MPH, that kind of thing. Part C, I don't feel like anybody couldn't read through that and tell me exactly what the case was. If you feel like you couldn't and you need to ask me for help, please do. Number 6 is very generic and it's kind of whatever. Preparing a study for television viewing habits of high school students. Describe 2 categorical variables, 2 quantitative that you might record. What are some examples of categorical variables? Favorite shows. What else? Okay, so time of day is a number, right? But if you labeled it like a category, okay, morning. So like even doing it as numbers could get vague. So depending on how you did it, if you did it like morning, afternoon, night kind of thing, that would absolutely work. What else?
The school the students go to.
The school the students go to. Let's give me one more. Satellite or cable, that's a good one, especially nowadays with the different options. Now, a couple quantitative. What are some quantitative examples?
Average
hours watched per day. What? It says 2. You didn't all write. Just don't. Age. Give me one more.
Numbers of TV.
Number of TVs in the house. That one, like I said, is very open-ended, but y'all are following the right thing there. Y'all have been fine with that. All right, so the bottom one gives you a table. Based off of what we've talked about, what does this table not have that a lot of them do? Like the people's names. I talked about this as an example. So this is an example of like, it doesn't help you to know who that line or what that line talks about. It's kind of like anonymous type thing, so where you aren't getting that information from the specific in whatever the individual is. What are the individuals in this data set? And some people are going to say households, but the table below includes data for 10 people. So that's where people would overlook and accidentally go down to from more than 1 million households. But each line is a person. Your answer is B there. Today, I'm not worried about it, but in the future, if we ever give multiple choice as homework and you write down a letter or just people, it is no credit. I need something to describe why you chose that. Sometimes it's like work, and sometimes it's like each line represented a person. That's fine. So in the future, you'll need to start getting in the habit of I need more than just a letter or just the answer for multiple choice for homework. How many variables does this data set contain? 6, 2 of which are categorical. That is C. If you looked at it real quick, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them look numerical out of the 6. Why is it 4 and not 5? It does gender as 1 and 2, so it just did like a code instead of the letter. But so you actually would have to look at what that's talking about, not just look through and be like numbers or not numbers. So that is the sense where a number is not a quantitative variable. Questions with any of that? So that was really quick check. Hopefully that does nothing but just makes you feel a little better. It should not have been that hard. All right, so back to your notes in front of you. We're on the side of making a bar graph, is that right? On the top, right? Analyze the categorical data, how to construct a bar graph, label and scale your axis, and title your graph. This is not an easy class. Like, you can't just like scale by and do fine in it. And for a class that is a higher level class, I cannot stress to you enough how many points I count off on every single testing quiz because people don't put a title or label. That is like elementary school level, and it loses more points in a high level class than anything else. So you've got to wrap your head around title, labels, be specific. Now, I'm probably going to rush through this a little bit more than I usually would. It's a bar graph. Y'all can draw a bar graph. This one says leave a space between the bars in a bar graph. I am very picky about this, but it's not always the case that AP or statistics in general is very picky about this. Let's say we did a graph for state of birth, the example on the left side, and I just wanted to have a graph of the different states of birth. I want space in between those bars. Why?
Because those representing different states.
They're what?
Representing different states.
They're representing different states. And then if I do it with like age and death, I might not have space in between. Why would I have space between with state of birth but not age and death?
Because there's only so many.
Because with state you don't need to like see a pattern like a curve.
You're going the right direction, but I don't want to go. I want to bring that in second. So yes, you're right, but I'm gonna bring that in. What else?
Age of death would be a range between two.
You're saying the right thing. Age and death would be a range.
In general, it's a numerical value, and you have other ways you can graph it.
Just states are.
So would I have a progression from one state to the next? They would be separate, correct? But your age at death, you were either 86 or 87. Like, so think about it that way. So that's what I'm really thinking about. If they're separate categories, leave space. If it's something that's like a number line that's a progression from one to the next, which we talk about that later. And then back to his point initially, does it really matter how I order states? So like, we probably put them in alphabetical order just for the heck of it, but I could do this with bars, and then I could rearrange that and get a different shape. Whereas if I did age, because these are in order like he was talking about, I would want to see that it peaked at this age, there were less here, more there, that kind of thing, which is what he said, which ties back into the same idea. So I'm pickier about this, but you will see stuff like in your book on the AP exam and stuff where they don't leave space. I kind of want you to understand why more than anything. Okay, so example, when Apple introduced the iMac, a very long time ago, the company wanted to know whether this new computer was expanding Apple's market share. Was the iMac mainly being bought by previous Macintosh owners, or was it being purchased by first-time computer buyers and by previous PC owners who are switching over? So this is a really good study This would be a really good study. There's a lot of information in this, but we're just dealing with this like one tiny little piece of it right now. This is actually a really good statistical study that somebody like Apple would do to see where they need to market. And there's a lot that we can do at the end of the year that would tell them which one to do, but we're just not there yet. So all we're looking at is, hey, make a graph of the different owners and where they are kind of thing. So what does my graph have to have?
Axis.
Axes, labels, title.
Bars.
Alright, so let's start here. Let's start with the title. I want to be as specific as possible. I usually like to write bar graph of. My habit there is because I am a teacher and I'm teaching you this class, and we go through so many different graphs that if I label it of, this is the name of the graph of, it kind of helps y'all when you're looking at it, like, oh, this one's a histogram, this one's a segmented bar graph, that kind of thing. Writing that it's a bar graph of isn't really that important. So this one is a bar graph of, I've got to come up with a title. Sometimes it's like very obvious, the exact wording you should use. This one's not. What do you want to call this? I want to be detailed enough. What's this a graph, bar graph of? Okay, let's finish that one at the end, which I usually don't like to do, but for the first one I will. What's going to go here? Previous ownership. So that is one of my axis labels. It gives me two things, count and percent. We dealt with this yesterday. It could give me count and I could find percents. How would I find the percents? Add them all up and then do like 85 divided by total and so forth. I can do it either way. I'm going to show you right now that these are counts. What's another word for counts that's usually written there that starts with F? Frequency. I would put on your notes where it says count, put an arrow and put frequency. That, for all of statistics, is fine if it means frequency, which is about 90% of the time going to be what's written there. So F, meaning frequency, is fine. Writing count is fine. Writing frequency is fine. Writing number of owners would be fine. So you can be specific or generic with these. Alright, so I've got to do numbering. Well, my previous ownership, let's go ahead and finish labeling that one. So I've got my axis title, now I need my axis labels. Does it matter what order I put those in? No, because that's the one that's not numerical. Oh, my pen's starting to mess up. Y'all even know that Mac was Macintosh. I probably don't even know that anymore. I'll go with that. I'm old, it's fine. I've got to put labels here. I'm choosing to do the frequency one, the count one. I'm not going to do the percents right now. I'll show you that in a second. What do I need to do? What do I need to make sure that I do?
Include those.
So I need to go at least to 355. Don't write anything. I will tell you, I will absolutely count off and it will drive me insane and make me want to give you a 0 on anything that you do with this with. Do not ever do that. Why? What do you mean by pattern?
It's not like space.
So all I did was wrote down the 3 numbers that are on there, and I'm saying the same distance from here to here is the same distance from here to here, the same distance from here to here. 60, 25, more, 2, something, 230, something, whatever. Is that the right way to do 270? Is this the right way to do that? Alright, so I need to just start with this one, and I'm hoping that you're looking at me going, wow, she's really teaching us this. Yes, I really do have to teach this. But if you are thinking, why in the world do you really have to teach that? Thank you. So I'm just gonna pick an easy number that I went at least as far as I needed. So now I'm gonna make sure, it's really hard for me to do equal interval. It's a lot easier to draw on paper. But yours should be spaced correctly. I will count off for stuff if it's not. Now I'm not gonna like pull out a ruler, but if yours looks terrible, I'll at least make notes. And I might even come back in and make myself dashes so I can see 50s to help myself a little bit. So my none bar is gonna start here. And it's going to go up to, what's this one, 85? Do you see any issues with that?
They're not the same size.
They're not the same
Width.
width. You do want them to be the same width. Now, again, I'm not going to be pulling out a ruler and double checking to make sure they're the exact same, but they should be close. So I want that spacing here because there's not that transition from none to PC. Those are separate categories. These should be spaced out about the same. I probably should have written it spaced out a little bit better.
Any senior who has not received an ID, please come to the Media Center. Any senior who has not received an ID, please come to the Media Center.
So this should be a very basic graph. I'm hoping this is very easy for you. I'm hoping you're thinking this is boring right now. But I'll have to finish my title. So it's bar graph of what? This is just context figuring out what I want to write. Y'all just help me out here.
Previous status of new napkin.
Previous,
Previous computer ownership.
I like that. Previous ownership of, ownership. Like computer ownership, is that what you said?
Yeah.
What did y'all say?
iMac consumers.
I'm at customers. So, it was just one by the iMac, right? Cannot stress enough. This will be about 5 points on a test. Those will be a couple points on a test. Those will be a couple points on a test, and you will be shocked how many people drop a grade just because they forget to write things down like that. Should be super easy. Alright, flip it back. Oh, let me go back to that example. First of all, how many? I don't want to talk about that. But I do want to talk about something. Okay, so I could have made this graph with percents or counts, correct? What was my percent for Macintosh?
71.
And these aren't going to be perfect. I would have to completely rescale everything. And y'all don't need to write this on there. I just want you to see this. If I had made my graph with these red labels instead of the blue labels, does anything change? If I had drawn it to scale, right? Like probably 80 is more like here. No, stretched up a little bit. But this picture should look the exact same. It's just whether you're writing them in terms of percents or frequencies. So if I ask you to make this graph on a test, some of you are going to do it with percent, some of you are going to do it with frequency, and it doesn't matter. Good. And if ever I am talking and you have a question then, don't let me keep talking. Just stop me. I don't care if you yell, whatever. You're not going to bother me. So here are data from a survey conducted at 8 high schools on smoking among students and their parents. It's on the back, sorry. So across the top, I have neither parent smokes, one parent smokes, both parents smoke. Across the side, I have student does not smoke and student smokes. Again, we can only deal with pieces in our triathlon here. There would be a lot of talk in how the study was conducted to determine how the student answered this. Because if you literally went to them face to face, there'd probably be issues with their answers. But that's a whole other chapter. I left extra space. Why did I leave extra space? Totals. So we should have totals on the left. Wait, on the right. We should have totals on the bottom. So go ahead and write in total and totals. You should write total twice. Out of habit, and this doesn't really matter if you do it or not, I always tend to 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I know mine aren't spaced very well. I always, out of habit, do this or a delta bar so that I am visually seeing where my totals are versus the rest. That's nothing that you have to do, but you will see my example. I do that kind of thing a lot just because visually I like to see totals separated. Looking up student does not smoke total, student smoke total, neither parent smokes row. Total, one parent smokes total, both parents smoke total. I need people in those rows to do those totals. So instead of all of us figuring out all the totals.
Neither parent smokes total is 1,356.
We could sit here and add up numbers, but I feel sure that y'all could do that without practice. All right, what is my student does not smoke total? Student does smoke?
1,004.
Oh, I'm down one. Because those were my labels. One parent smokes total.
2,239.
Sorry, I forgot y'all are copying mine. I should have written better and bigger. Both parents smoke total.
1,780.
Did they need me to call those out? They can't read it, whatever. So do I need something right here? Okay, you don't actually know if you need it or not. Can we find something to go here?
Yes.
How do I figure it out? Either add this or add this. Should it matter? No, because it should be the same thing either way. It's 5,375. And it's called a two-way table. Why is it called a two-way table?
It can be read two ways.
It can be read two ways, and it's
Well, the variables.
yeah. Alright, so if it is a two-way table, how many variables are there? It is a two-way table. How many variables are there? 2. I think I just don't point that out enough because it always makes people think at first, if it's a two-way table, it's 2 variables. You got one across the top, one across the side. So our variable across the top is what? In general. Parent smoking status. The variable on the left, student smoking status. So it says first look at the distribution separately. If the row and column totals are not included, find them. Sometimes you're given those and sometimes you're not. This is our first vocab that people get mixed up on, and it can get confusing if you don't make yourself find the difference right now. We just found totals. Where are those totals? This is like part of why I do this. These totals are in the margin. These totals are in the margin. As opposed to being something in here. These are not in the margin. We use the numbers in the margin to find marginal distributions. This is a marginal distribution. It was not written as a two-way table. I only had one variable. But if I take this and basically only look at it as, I would end up making that a bar graph with 3 bars and using this margin. Go with me there, looking at it really briefly. Or I could separately look at the other variable and instead I would have 2 bars for that variable. Go with me there. All right, so if I'm using those, that is marginal distribution, which means we are not using any of the numbers in here at all. And I'm being very picky about this because a lot of people get this mixed up. Marginal distribution. You might even want to come back to this and write off to the side marginal distribution.
That the whole graph is.
Yeah.
Very marginal.
Yes. So basically, if I'm only looking at one variable at a time, it's marginal. But it's because the numbers come from marginal. Alright, so we're gonna look at the marginal distributions first. So I can ask you, and I'll give you an example of this. I have given quizzes before where I say, find the marginal distribution of, and I give half of the class, I would say student smoking behavior, and half of the class, I would ask parent smoking behavior, and you would have to know which one to do. So like, you cheat like the person beside of you, you're copying the wrong version, you're doing the wrong thing. Does that make sense? Alright, so I would give you wording on which one to do, which variable. So the first one this one says is, let's put on the side where it says student does not smoke, student smokes. Just write this and put like student smoking status. So that's this would be if I asked the question of marginal distribution of the student smoking status. I would just say it up there. Alright, so how do I find I can do percent or counts.
Yeah, but I think the distribution was the thing with the.
I don't want to answer your question yet because it won't confuse you, but it'll confuse you if you try it. I can do it of counts or percents. We just talked about that. But then if you're trying to relate certain things with different totals, just like yesterday, you can't directly relate them. I would pretty much just always switch everything to percents. So let's go ahead and I want to write out what I'm actually doing here just because this is our notes. How do I find the percent for where it says student does not smoke? Tell me what numbers I'll type in my calculator.
4371 over 5375.
I want to see that on a quiz too, if I do a quiz. To where I'm saying these are the numbers I use, and then now just write the percent. Obviously you have to type times 100. And I feel fine that y'all can type good numbers too. And then smokes, I would put what over what instead? Over
5%.
So what is always going to go on in the denominator for marginal? The overall total. So these are the numbers numerator is the number for the margin. What goes on the bottom is always your overall total. So I could say, find the marginal distribution of student smoking behavior and graph it. This is the process that you would take. How many bars would that graph have? 2. One of them would go to 81.32%. One of them would go to 18.68%. So like the distribution itself that you were asking about, I'm very vague about that because usually I would say do the marginal distribution and graph it. The distribution itself is like the whole thing of like finding the numbers and graphing it. Alright, so then with neither, let's just write these down because I think I could write it. The first one's going to be what in the numerator?
1356.
So 1356 over 5375 is going to give you 25.23%. So just write these with me. I think I could be fun putting these in. 2239 over 5375, which gives us 41.66%. And 1780 still out of 5375, which gives us 33.12%. If this is a test or a quiz, what should I at least very vaguely look at with these numbers?
If they add up to 100.
Add up to about 100. You'd be surprised how many people put like 40 something here, 40 something here, and then like 30 here, and just it never clicks to them to be like, oh, that doesn't work. So just, I mean, at least take a second to look at it and be like, does that make sense? So, like I said, I could give you a quiz, and I would ask you just for one or the other, probably not both. So make sure that you're paying attention to wording and things like that. All right, so now to the last part, which is on the back on the right side for you guys. Is that right? I tried to read it different. This is conditional distribution. So marginal distributions itself should be super easy. The reason people miss it is they get it mixed up with which one is marginal and which one is conditional. So conditional is something like given a condition. You can go to your friend's house under the condition that you clean your room. So it matters if you clean your room or not, right? Before you get to go to the second thing. So we are only looking at a certain condition.
Teachers, please pardon the interruption. At this time, please send any student who is a senior or a junior that has not received their Chromebook to the Media Center. That's any senior or junior who has not received their Chromebook to the Media Center. Thank you.
Alright, so I want to show you what we're talking about before we actually start doing it. So, is that anybody needs to go? Find the complete distribution of student smoking behavior if neither parent smokes. So where it says if neither parent smokes, I want you to put an arrow there and be like condition. That is the condition. Or condition / given. And I want that towards the bold part right here that says if neither parent smokes. Like, I think people overlook that part on the notes. So, a lot of times we'll call it given. It's the given part. But that's the condition that we're given. So, I don't want you to draw that. But if I am just looking at that section, if neither parent smokes, I am only looking at a small portion of this graph. I am only now looking at this portion of the graph. That's the condition. If I'm finding the first answer, I'm only finding of that blue box, I only want the one that is, the student does not smoke. Here. Does that make sense visually that y'all see that? And you don't need to like draw this, but it helps to visually see what I'm doing before I start doing it. So like the first answer is yellow out of this total. The second one would be this box out of this total, and so forth. So with where we are on the sheet, now that you see kind of where it comes from, given that neither parent smokes, finding that the student does not, what number is going to go on top?
1168.
out of what? And again, I feel sure that you guys could type in numbers of 5%. So for a student does smoke, it would be what over what?
188 over 13.36.
And that gives you 13.86%. Now, there are going to be circumstances where you have to decide which one is the condition. And I am going to briefly talk about that today, but I'm going to talk about that more tomorrow than anything. My next one is given the condition that what? One parent smokes. So now I'm only looking at this column. I'm basically covering up everything except this column. And sometimes I actually do that on like a test or quiz. I'll cover up everything except what I need. So this one is going to be what over what? Over anybody questions about what I'm doing, not following why I switched numbers? So my outlined blue box has now shifted to be at one parent smokes. So then this one I'm doing what over what?
Or 16. Or 2.
And then the last one is going to be what over what? As the first one.
1380 over 17.
So I want to make sure you have all those numbers you see I've written down. Alright, so I chose to do all of these. How many variables were in this one? We already talked about a little bit ago. 2 variables, two-way table. One of our variables is parent smoking status, one of them is student smoking status. I chose to separate it by which variable? Parent smoking status. So I separated it by parent smoking status variable. Everybody's with me with that one. I could have done either way. There is a very specific reason why we chose that one and not the other one.
What do you mean separated?
So like, this is one answer, this is one answer, this is one answer. These are answers to what this whole one is, neither, one, and whatever, both. And those are all answers to parent smoking status. You clean your room to be able to see if you can go to your friend's house. Are you just going to walk in the door and then ask your mom immediately if you can go to your friend's house? Because what has to happen first? So something had to happen first to see if the other thing happens, right? Why did I choose to separate it by parent smoking status?
Parents had to come before the students.
Parents came before the student. Sometimes it's more obvious than others. Sometimes the examples are vague. A lot of times it's like I could do it by trying to think of an easy example. Well, even if we did like gender and grade in the class, which one came first? So it's split by gender and then look at the different grades in the class by gender. Makes sense. So sometimes it's very obvious, like one of them had to come first. Here, even though you're like, but the parent could have started smoking later, that was still kind of an obvious example, but sometimes it's something weird like hair color and eye color. Did one of those come first? So that wouldn't be something where I would expect you to have chosen that on your own. Does that make sense? I'm going to give you an example where it's like there is a right answer. I don't want to go from one example in the book. Alright, so I want to make sure that we at least get through drawing this one. So it's the last thing on here. It says draw 3 segmented bar graphs. I don't like that it says 3 segmented bar graphs. I would rather just say draw a segmented bar graph. That sounds confusing. I would just say, you might want to mark that out. It says draw 3 segmented bar graphs. I would just write all the way out to right before it says the word to compare, and just say draw a segmented bar graph to compare conditional distribution. And I am going to be very specific about the way I labeled this one, because doing this helps students later. And I am a very, especially if you've had me before, I am a very color-coded kind of person. Visually, colors make sense to me. It helps me a lot with my notes. And I try to do that as much as I can. So this one, it's going to be a conditional distribution of something. I'm not filling that in yet on purpose, but don't do it yet because you don't know how much space. Of something separately for each. Something. And I like writing it that way because it helps you do it the right way and think through it. This one, I have to think through. This one, I don't. I did this one separately for each what variable. If you have colors and you are a color person, I would get it out just to highlight this with what I'm going to tie in. Colors, not colors, I don't really care though. So now, what goes in this blank? And you'll see a lot of my answer key stuff that I give you does color coded stuff like this so that visually, if you're going back and looking through it, you can see. And if you are a person who does this and does color coded, I would go as far back to go here and at least say, hey, this is the color I chose for these. This is the color that I chose for these, so that you're seeing it throughout your notes, which one goes where. And then so that's my title. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller because I wanted y'all to see that well. Alright, so now we're going to do it. We are literally separately for each parent smoking status. So which means our graph should be separately for each smoking status, parent smoking status. So how many parent smoking statuses were there? So there should end up being 3 bars to our graph. So I'm separating it by, and this is where my colors come in as far as me connecting things. Whatever I wrote here is going to be here. So that's my label. That's my generic. What else do I need down there?
Labels.
The label. So how many am I going to have? We just said 3. And we might end up shorthanding this somehow, but I'm not right now. Neither one. Now the list itself, oh, it did go neither one and then both, right? This is one of those weird things where like these are separate categories, so it doesn't really matter the order, but doesn't it kind of make sense to go from neither one to both, and we see if it kind of changes progression. So that's kind of one of those weird ones. All right, so now this is where some people are going to get messed up. What do I do about bars?
Do you need 2 for each one?
Yes. So how do I do that? And there's actually something you can do as a side-by-side bar graph. We're doing it as a segmented bar graph, which is the same thing. I'll show you a side-by-side too. Okay, so that would be a side-by-side. What's the same way I could do it, but only do one?
You could
All the
stack.
same
You
height,
could stack.
and then the shade in a portion
Oh,
of it.
put a line.
Okay, so why are they all the same height?
Because each of them have 100% for that condition.
So we can do them as total, and that's why it makes sense to do percents. So I am making 3 bars that are all the exact same height, exact same size.
And are these touching or not?
I go back to the no because they're separate categories. We don't go from one to the next. And then the answer you were saying about side-by-side bar graph, there is absolutely nothing wrong with making a side-by-side bar graph too. I think visually, because you can deal with numbers instead of percents, I think a segmented bar graph is easier to do. So these should all be the same height. They should be spaced out. Mine are super spaced out well. What's something else? And yes, you said I need to split them. I'm going to. You're correct. What else do I need right now?
Your other label.
Okay, so what should I put over here?
70%.
And that's fine with me for percent. What should be here? Always, always, always. Because it is 100% of that category. And then again, y'all have line paper, well, or you can do the best you can with labeling these. Usually you're gonna do it on line paper and do a whole lot better than me. Not very good at all. I know it seems weird, but doing it on the board is really hard because when you're this close and trying to think out spacing, it's just awkward. And I could have this connected to that. I could have, I should draw a straight line. I'm just kind of going quick right now. All right, so you said I need to do what with each bar? With each of these, I need to do what with it? Split it. So, of my neither parent smoke, how many sections am I going to have with that? 2. Is it always going to be 2?
Yes.
In this case, yes. If we had something where there were like 5 different answers for each student, there'll be 5 different pieces. So, another thing where I always have somebody who messes up, I always have somebody go 86% and 13%. Is that right? No. If I do this line down here at 13.86%, what does that mean? The rest is 86. Please don't sit there and take 2 minutes to draw something in. Dots, quick lines, squiggles. It's fine. I'm going to come back to that. Now, if I did that here, would I want to make my next bar look like this?
No.
No. So you want to make them look the same. So what is that squiggle line, the blue part representing?
Student smoking.
Student smoking. So I want to keep going with student smoking being on the bottom. So 18 something. My spacing is not very well with these or straight. I do want to finish though. And then Yeah, my spacing is terrible, but y'all get the picture. Do better than I did. Alright, so there's something really important that is missing from my graph that
Let's see.
a key. So most people write key, and I don't care if you write key, but it needs to be, so like here we have a generic and then the specifics. So your key needs to have that too. So let's just go ahead and write it that way. My key, I don't like that I did blue. Because it's going to be confusing with that. So pretend that's just orange instead. Alright, and really all I need is this versus this. That's enough to be able to tell the difference. So here should say what? What's my generic of what these are talking about?
20 times students, 50% percentage.
And so you can write key, but there's no reason to write that and write key. So my blue came from whatever is right there should be here. Whatever is there should be here is why I do colors. And then my shaded in we said is dew smoke, right? For some reason, this topic that we just did really messes up some people. I don't know why. I don't know if y'all feel real good about it or y'all just don't feel like talking if you don't. I will tell you, if you don't understand a topic, not asking is the worst thing you can do.